I think I've answered this one before too. But since it was asked 4 times in the latest tranche of questions, I feel like I need to answer it. I'm happy to answer it. It's a fun subject. But what are your favorite songs of your mother's and the Go-Go's? I don't want to repeat myself because I'm pretty sure I probably gave the same answer before. But hello, everybody. Welcome to Duke's Download. I'm your host, James Duke Mason. And today we are doing yet another Ask Duke Anything episode. We've had a few episodes with some great guests, and we have some episodes coming up with some great guests. But I figured that since it's been a little while since we've done one of these, that I would give you guys the opportunity to ask me some questions. And we got a really good response. So thank you to all of you for your input. The first question that I wanted to answer today, or that was presented to me by one of our viewers, was how many US presidents have you met? And who are some of the other famous people that you've met over the years? Um, you know, I have actually, let's see, I've been in the room with one, two, three, 6 presidents, I think. I met Ronald Reagan when I was a little kid, when I was a baby, so I don't remember it, but my dad remembers it. So I think that counts. I met him at Chasen's, which was a big restaurant in Hollywood back in the day. My parents took me there, and Nancy and Ronald Reagan were there. Apparently, our dog tore at Nancy's stockings, which is a part of the folklore. But so that was quite a scene. But apparently, he did hold me. So, for what it's worth, I did meet Ronald Reagan. I never got to meet the president who was in office when I was born, George H.W. Bush, which was a regret of mine that I never got to meet the president when I was born. But I met Jimmy Carter. One of the most amazing experiences of my life, actually, was when I was 21. My friend Sean and I drove to Plains, Georgia. We were in Florida, but we drove to Plains, which is the hometown of President Carter. And we actually saw him speak at Sunday school, which was an amazing experience. I think we even knew at the time, like, this is probably the last time ever in American history where something like this is going to happen, having a former president speaking at his local, church. And obviously having so much respect and admiration and reverence for Jimmy Carter. It was just such an amazing experience. And I got to meet him. I got to meet Rosalind. And of course, was heartbroken when he died a year or two ago. I mean, he was very old, but it was a real loss. And I just am so grateful that I got the opportunity to meet him, to go to Plains, to have some peanut ice cream, which is a big thing there. He's a peanut farmer. And then, so I met President Carter, Reagan, let's see, Bill Clinton I met, which was a surreal experience. I actually had a letter that he wrote to me, probably not him personally, but when I was 13, I wrote to his foundation and said, I wanted to go into politics, that, I know that President Clinton had met JFK when he was young. And so I got a letter back on his stationery, and I still have it memorized by heart. But in fact, I'll recount the end of it. It was, most importantly, don't give up on your dreams. You can do anything that your imagination, effort, and talent will let you achieve. Sincerely, Bill Clinton. And so in 2019, I had the opportunity to meet him in person, and I brought that letter that he had written to me when I was 13, and I told him that I was running for city council in West Hollywood, and he re-signed it and wrote, "Lessons still hold, good luck, Bill Clinton." So, I mean, that, for me, that was such a surreal experience, because when I was like 12, I literally sat in like my mom's Pilates class while she was doing Pilates, reading like the famous David Marinus 500, 600-page biography of Bill Clinton. And so then to be with him and touch him, shake his hand and just be looking at it it was just a beyond surreal experience. I was in the room with George W. Bush. I didn't meet him, but I sat right behind him at Nancy Reagan's funeral which was a really surreal experience. I could do a whole video on that, but I went with Melissa Rivers, who's a family friend, her mother, obviously. Was good friends. Joan was good friends with the Reagans. My dad worked for Reagan, which is why I went. I met the Reagans when I was young, by the way. But Yeah, I met. I mean, I was in the room with W. I met President Obama twice, both at the White House after I worked on his campaign in 2012, and then also at a fundraiser here in LA a few months prior to that, I think. And I met Michelle Obama, by the way. Um, and and then also, let's see, George. Unfortunately, was in the room with Donald Trump a couple times, I think twice, at the Beverly Hills Hotel back in the day when I was a teenager. I didn't meet him, thank God. I didn't have to. Didn't give him any. Didn't help. Didn't feed into his ego by going up to him and shaking his hand or anything like that. But this was pre-presidency, so he hadn't become quite the evil villain that he is now. And then Joe Biden I met when he was running in 2019. And yeah, I don't think I'm missing anybody. But yes, that makes one, two, three, five, six presidents, I think. Um, yeah, and then I would say though, of all the people I've met in my life, and I've had the privilege and incredible honor of meeting a lot of people that I respected and looked up to over the years. But the person that I would say of all the people I've met that had the most impact, where I won't forget that moment, was meeting Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip in 2002. My mom performed at the Golden Jubilee in London in 2002, and I was backstage with her. I'll just never forget, standing along the rope line, and there was like a red carpet backstage, and Queen Elizabeth walking down the carpet, and we all had to bow or curtsy, and yeah, I didn't talk to her much, but I talked to Prince Philip for a little bit, and he came up to me and made a joke about me being in the band, and I mean, he could not have been nicer, and it was just one of those memories where you go like, I'm never going to forget this. I wish I'd had the chance to meet Diana. My mom met Diana. I never met Diana, but I got to meet Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, and that will definitely go down as one of my most cherished memories. So I was 10 years old when that happened. So it's crazy to think that was 25 years ago almost. Um, in terms of other questions, what is your physical and mental wellness routine? I've had a lot of change on this front in the last few years because, I'm 34 now. Um, it's funny when you look back, you go, what your version of wellness used to be is, my version of wellness and health and fitness used to be literally, walking down the street and getting, 5 or 6,000 steps in a day. I mean, I will say for me, uh, you know, walking makes a gigantic difference. I don't think people realize just how big of a difference, waking up in the morning, instead of sitting in your apartment or house and, just sitting there on your computer or your phone. I mean, I can say that in the last few years, just waking up and walking out my door and getting some sun and some air, I mean, that has made a gigantic difference for my mental health. It's such a small sort of, people I think it's overrated but like it's made a huge difference in my life. I will say, yes, on a mental front, it's made a big difference. And yeah, it does help with your physical fitness and like it's good to get some, physical movement. But that alone is not necessarily, I used to think that alone, doing a certain amount of steps a day was a big part of my fitness. Unfortunately, I realized that it requires a little bit more than that if you really want to be fit. I mean, that's a good baseline, but like about 2 years ago, I started going to the gym for real, and I made a good friend who really changed my life. My friend Joe, just I met it. We met through the gym, and he just totally transformed my physical self, but also just my whole routine and daily life. And like, I realized what a massive difference working out and weight training and all that can really do. I mean, I certainly I'm not professing to be an expert. I have a long way to go. But if you had said to me 3 years ago that I'd be waking up 5 days a week and doing an hour and a half in the gym, I would have said, like, you're crazy. So, I mean, that's made a tremendous difference. I walk to and from the gym. I make sure I'm getting my protein every day. I do a different body group or muscle group every day, and it makes a gigantic difference, not just for my body, but in my head. I leave there feeling pumped up, feeling energized, feeling clear-headed. But meditation too has made a huge difference in the last few years. Um, I mean, just having sort of like the mindfulness. I know it's such a cliche these days. You hear a lot about people talking about this, but it really, I mean, even 10 minutes a day makes a huge difference for me because I'm an overthinker. I'm always worrying. I'm always anxious, and just having that sort of peace of mind. I don't do it every day, but I try to do it as often as I can. Just 10 minutes a day, just to clear my head and feel centered. Um, Faith too. I know everybody has very different views about this. I've always been spiritually minded. I'm lucky that I grew up in a family, that encouraged curiosity about the world and everything beyond it. My partner is very spiritually and religiously inclined and Christian. We go to church together almost every Sunday. I haven't gone the last few weeks just because I've been so busy. But, I think even if you're not a person of faith, because I know, again, a lot of people have different views, I just think having and that's why I think meditation too is so important because just having like something bigger than yourself or something just, to collect or something just to like get you out of your head, I think is so important. And in my case, that's faith, but I think, and meditation but I think just having something that like, takes you out of your head is so important. It makes you think about something bigger and more, just bigger than yourself. I think that's really important. And so going to church, even if, it doesn't matter whether it was synagogue or, Buddhist temple, just for me, going to church has just been great for, and it centers you and it gives you a sense of like, here's what I really need to be focused on as opposed to, my own trivial insecurities or concerns, that I think most of us have on a daily basis. Um, the next question was, oh, this is an interesting one. Will your dad, Morgan, ever do a documentary about his dad, James Mason, like Mariska Hargitay did about her mom, Jane Mansfield? I don't know if some of you may have seen this documentary, but Mariska Hargitay, who's a big actress in her own right, did a wonderful documentary about her mother, Jane Mansfield, who was a big star back in the 1950s and 60s. And it was on HBO, I think. I watched it, I think, like 6 months ago. But it was a great documentary and kind of, spoke to me in a lot of ways because, she was very young when her mother died. I think she was even like, I think she might have been like 10 or even younger, I think, when her mother died. I think she was in the car. Her mother was in a car accident. And I think Mariska was in the car with her mother when she died. So, I mean, it's a tragic story. But, what I found so compelling about this documentary was it's her, interviewing people, who knew her mother, going to the old location of their old house that they lived in when she was a kid, like sort of retracing the steps of her family history and connecting with her mother, who had died many years before. And I kind of really, it resonated with me because as many of you know, watching this, I've had a similar journey of, rediscovering my grandfather, discovering him, my grandfather, James Mason, who was a big actor himself back in the day, and so he died 8 years before I was born. So, any chance I get, whether it's through screenings or through meeting his co-stars, or, I even have some of his like personal effects and belongings, his checkbook and his shirts and like dress shirts, things that, that make me feel connected to him. I have one of his rings. It's kind of it's a emotionally charged thing. And So we actually have had conversations before with a certain filmmaker, who is very, in the documentary world, very successful and very well known. We had a conversation, or we've had conversations with him about the possibility of doing a documentary about my family and my dad and my mom and my grandparents and my my story as well, sort of weaving that all together. I don't know if or when it'll happen, because I think it will one day, but there's a lot that goes into it, especially because this particular filmmaker wants to use a lot of our home movies that my dad has kept since the early 80s as part of the process or part of the film. And I think my dad just wants to make sure that before we relinquish those to anybody, that we look through them and make sure there's nothing on there that we wouldn't want the world to see. Just personal moments and stuff. You don't know on home movies. You don't know what's going to be on there. Just just personal stuff. Any family would want to make sure that stuff is gone through first. But I could see it happening one day. In the meantime, we actually have a book coming out called James. I think I've maybe mentioned this on here before, but James Mason, The Star Hollywood Forgot, which is a book that this woman, Madeline King Porter, wrote. She's been working on it, I think, for like 8 years. It's finally coming out in September. And I was part of helping her put it together. We got the chance to sit down with a bunch of his co-stars, some of whom are gone now, like Barbara Rush, Madeline and I interviewed her in person for the book. She started a movie with him in 1956. So to get to sit down with her was an amazing, full circle moment. But I mean, all sorts of other people, Jeff Bridges, Helen Mirren. I mean, a lot of big stars that worked with him were interviewed for this book, and that's coming out in September. So I'm sure Madeline and I will do some promo for that in the next few months. But yeah, I think a documentary could happen at some point. I just think it's about, it may take a little while, but I think whether it's centered on my grandfather or my mother, and then also, I know there's actually a separate project that my mom is working on potentially about her life individually. But I think there might also be a Mason family-oriented film at some point as well. So anyway, there's a lot going on that front. When did you, I think I've talked a little bit about this too, but when did you begin to understand and become interested in politics? It's funny, I was just thinking about this yesterday or a couple days ago. I don't remember Bill Clinton's presidency. I remember, maybe vaguely, like very vaguely, I have some vague recollection of like hearing about something, because we lived in London in the from 96 to 99. And I think I might have a vague memory of hearing about something about him back then. But like in terms of my first real political awareness, it was definitely like the 2000 election. And I remember watching Fahrenheit 9/11 for the first time and, just being appalled by the travesty of the 2000 election and the election being stolen from Al Gore. And I just remember, it's funny because it just shows you how weird time is and context and all that. Not that George W. Bush wasn't a terrible president. He certainly was. But it's just funny how years later, it's like I hated George W. Bush with every fiber of my being. And yet now I do anything to have George W. Bush back in office. But, back then, I was about as vehemently anti-Bush as you could get. When I was 12, I signed a impeachment petition. And, I remember supporting Wesley Clark when he ran in the Democratic primary in 2004. I was 12, or 11 even, I think. So I was politically involved and engaged from a very young age. And then supporting John Kerry. I still have in my files the homemade sign that I made from election night 2004. And I was just devastated when he lost. I just thought about, I remember saying to my mom, all all the soldiers and troops who were going to die in Iraq because of this decision. And and so I just stuck with it after that. I always from the beginning, which is why it's so funny. Sometimes I'll have people now make comments like, because I worked for some more moderate inclined Democrats. People say, "Oh, you're a Republican." I'm like, I literally was a part of Kids for Kerry when I was 12, like, and was signing impeach Bush petitions at 12. So respectfully, don't come at me and tell me that I'm insufficiently democratic, because I think very few people, especially my age, have the kind of credentials that I have. So if I may say so myself. But so I've been very politically interested and involved from a very young age, and I just have continued to be since then. So I always say, I love music, I love pop culture, I love movies. But the one thing that, like, every morning I just get up and I'm like, I just want to do it and read it and listen to it and watch it just out of pure passion is politics. Not just politics, but like, issues. And like, I find just for me, the idea that even in a small way that you can help influence the world around you and make an impact in certain issues that are important to you. I mean, that like it has a tangible effect on people and on the world around you. I just think that's it's kind of exciting. It gives you a sense of purpose, and you feel even in tiny ways that you're moving the needle. That's a really fulfilling and exciting prospect. So, yeah, well, so I think I've answered this one before too. But since it was asked 4 times in the latest tranche of questions, I feel like I need to answer it. I'm happy to answer it. It's a fun subject. But what are your favorite songs of your mother's and the Go-Go's? I don't want to repeat myself because I'm pretty sure I probably gave the same answer before. But it's hard for me because there are so many amazing songs. Heaven is a Place on Earth, obviously, it doesn't get much more iconic than that. And on top of it, actually, funnily enough, I don't know why this is, but I've noticed that my mom's Spotify numbers over the last few months have gone from, I think the highest they'd ever been was like 6.4 million monthly listeners. For whatever reason, her numbers are now up to 8.7 million monthly listeners on Spotify. So I'm just so happy for her and proud of her, and grateful that people are listening and that her audience continues to grow, literally, which is crazy. But Heaven is a Place on Earth, Mad About You. I think I've talked about that before, just on a personal level. That song and the video just have a really personal, emotional effect on me, because it really just embodies them my parents when they first met and their relationship, and captures the golden era of the mid '80s. As far as the Go-Go's go, Head Over Heels is great, and seeing them perform it at Coachella, and they had this amazing, it was super. Billy Joe Armstrong performed with them and sang it, which gave it that extra like punk rock edge. And then they actually, it's funny. This is kind of an interesting anecdote, but like for years I worked on a project that was based on the life of Bob Mizer, who was a famous gay photographer and magazine publisher back in the 50s and 60s. He had a magazine that was like, before gay pornography was legal, he would have these like muscle magazines, and guys in like loincloths and everything, where it was erotic, but it wasn't like, overly explicit. But he was kind of like the Hugh Hefner of the gay world back in the 50s and 60s. And I worked on a project for years based on his story, and Tashin actually put out a book called Bob's World that we optioned. My producing partner and I optioned it and tried to get it made into a show. But funnily enough, totally randomly, when the Go-Go's performed at Coachella, and they took the same like visual element on tour with them a year ago, they actually got the rights from the Bob Mizer estate to use some of this like 50s pinup retro like footage and photos of these guys, with the muscle guys, to use in the backdrop. And it was so cool. It's kind of hard to, like, unless you see it. It's actually on YouTube. You guys should go watch it. Unless you see it, it's kind of hard to describe. But what I love about the Go-Go's is not only were they an 80s band, but they also had like a lot of this like classic Americana sort of iconography, even the Vacation album, with like the sort of 50s like font and the colors. It was just like I've always been a big fan of like retro 50s like vintage kind of uh music and just iconography. And so I love that the Go-Go's, kind of alluded to a lot of that in their work and surf rock and all that. So, um, yeah, so I'd say like head over heels Vacation for the Go-Go's. Next question. What is your opinion on the ongoing war in Ukraine, given the cost of living in countries like the UK, which are having to pick up the cost of the war? I mean, this is something that I feel, I'm very sympathetic to. I mean, America's having a hard enough time, with cost of living crisis. But I think, I follow politics in other countries enough to know that like the UK is dealing with a massive, it seems like no country in the world almost is spared from like, there's always we're in an endless political crisis and spiral of doom that we can't seem to get out of. And England seems to be in a similar situation, and a lot of other European countries. And, so I understand why people would be reticent given the financial and economic situation to continue providing funding and support to Ukraine, given the cost of this war, which has been going on for what, 3 years, over 3 years now. But I feel very strongly that I think if America had really stepped up, in a way that we normally do, but because of the president that we have right now, we haven't, at least since Donald Trump took office. I think we might be in a different situation, but I feel sad and angry that unfortunately some other countries in the world have had to pick up, where America has fallen short because of who we have in office at the moment. I think if Kamala Harris were president, we might be in a different situation right now with the war in Ukraine. But look, I hope for the people of Ukraine that it ends soon. I'm not saying I believe that that's likely, but obviously our hearts are with the people of Ukraine, and I've been very outspoken for a long time now, going back to 2013, speaking out about Vladimir Putin and just how evil and I think his government is, and how we have to do everything we can to stop them and to defeat him in the end. What are some of your favorite LGBTQ plus themed films? It's funny because I've actually seen 3 new films, well, not new films, new to me, in the last month that I'd never seen before. And they're 3 gay classics, which admittedly I'm kind of embarrassed to admit I'd never seen before. I'd seen one of them, kind of like scenes from it, The Birdcage from the 90s with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane. I'd seen bits of it, but I don't know if I'd ever watched the film all the way through. And so my boyfriend Army and I sat down and watched it, and I absolutely loved it. And it's just one of those movies. It's definitely, I wouldn't say dated's the wrong word. It's just it really captured a certain moment. You can tell based on it was the 90s. There were certain subjects and things that they could only allude to, but I mean, for its time, it was a pretty big deal that 2 straight, or at least 1 straight star, Robin Williams, performed or starred in this movie about a gay couple, and it was great to finally see it all the way through. And of course, it was very funny and very entertaining. To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. I'd never seen that all the way through. So Army and I watched that. And I mean, that was just a great film. Better than I thought it would be, because to be honest, I kind of was reticent to see it because I had this idea that, it was 3 like, super straight guys playing like drag queens. But it was actually a lot better and more heartfelt and more just authentic than I thought it would be, and I really enjoyed watching it. It was also really funny and sweet in certain parts. I think my favorite though of all 3 the one which I'm about to mention, which I actually just watched last night, which blew me away. I mean, Army and I were both just completely blown away and emotional and just like touched by what a beautifully, crafted and written and performed film it really was, is Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And I'd never seen that. And I mean, visually it was stunning. The colors, the performances, just literally the performances, the visual element of the outfits and the dancing and the singing, and then just being sort of blown away by the actual performances. Like, I mean, Terrence Stamp was just, beyond words. I mean, just for a heterosexual, I think even then, kind of older man to pull that off and to be as sort of, you know, um, just it was just an incredible performance. And Guy Pearce was fantastic, and Hugo Weaving was amazing too. I mean, the whole thing was just it's a beautiful film. For those of you who haven't seen it, and the soundtrack was great, and yeah, it was interesting because I did a little sort of research, wondering why the mid '90s in particular, like 1994, '95, were such a those two movies are very similar in some ways, and yet, according to Grok, anyway, there wasn't a lot of. It was kind of a coincidence that they came out at the same time. Like, I think Priscilla may have already been in production, maybe the other way around by the time that the other was released, but they were different enough that both films came out around the same time. But I think it was just, from what I've read, it was just, the mid '90s were a time when Bill Clinton had become president. These issues were beginning to be discussed and talked about in a more, forward way. And so, it was kind of a coincidence that these two movies that happened to be about drag queens, came out around the same time, because this was the first time really in like mainstream cinema where these types of subjects could be discussed. And so, there was a lot of films around that time that discussed LGBTQ themes. I know In and Out with Kevin Kline came out in the late '90s. Birdcage. So it was just the first time when mainstream cinema really started picking up on gay, or making films about gay topics in a prolific way. What are some of your favorite places on the planet? I love Mexico, which is where my parents live now. Mexico City is great. Puerto Vallarta is probably my favorite place in Mexico, because not only is it tropical and warm, but it also has a big gay community there. Obviously, I have friends who live down there. So my parents and I have gone there a few times together over the last few years. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for France. Even though I haven't been there in a long time, I grew up there for a lot of my childhood. I lived in the south of France for about 13 years, and so. I'll always feel a certain amount of affection for the south of France. And, I do. It's funny, though, because when I was a kid, I hated it. But in hindsight, if only I could have been there as an adult, I think about all the food and the wine and it's just, in the climate, the beaches. It's hard to beat south of France in the summer, I have to say. And I have so many great memories of being there. The place that I haven't been to yet, which I'm going to next year for the first time, is Australia, because my mom is touring there next year, and I've never been, so I'm really excited to go. But my mom is doing a farewell tour, so she said that since it's her final tour, she'd allow me to go with her. So I'm going to go in February or March next year, 2027, and go with her for that. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I've had the enormous privilege of experiencing a lot of amazing places over the years. South Africa, and I think I've touched on this before, just talking about all the places I went with my mom on tour. But I've had the privilege of experiencing a lot of amazing places, and I'm really grateful, because I think it gave me as I know I have talked about this before, but it's given me a unique perspective, I think, or an international perspective that a lot of people don't have. Final two questions. Who are some of your favorite contemporary actors and actresses? I love, and these are kind of cliche, but like I love Leonardo DiCaprio, even though he kind of always plays himself. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street, great movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In terms of contemporary actors, he definitely is at the top of my list. Brad Pitt basically cannot do wrong, I think, can do no wrong. Julianne Moore is my favorite female actress. And I actually this story came to mind when I saw this question. I'll never forget, in 2011, a friend of mine had written a script for a movie actually about Anita Bryant, the famous anti-gay, anti-gay rights campaigner from the 70s. And Julianne Moore was attached to play Anita Bryant. And I happened to be in New York that summer for something, and my friend invited me over and said, do you want to play a role in the script reading for my new script with Julianne Moore? So I got to actually literally sit across from her and do the script reading with her. And she's just, talk about a class act, offbeat, isn't afraid to do edgy or weird, roles. And I've just always had, I've always been a huge fan of hers. Tilda Swinton too. I love offbeat actors and actresses. That's why I'm a huge Christopher Guest fan. I mean, all those movies, Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show. I love Catherine O'Hara. May she rest in peace. Anyway, I could go on and on, but those are just a few of the people that came to mind. What are some of the things you have going on this summer? Well, actually, it's funny. My parents are arriving in town tomorrow here in LA. So I'm going to be with them for a week. And then I'm going to Florida for a week. My partner, Army, his family lives there. So we're going to go spend a week with them in Florida, which I'm looking forward to. Not just to spend time with them, but also it's going to be warm and sunny. And I do love, despite Florida's politics, I do love a lot of parts of it. I mean, I love Miami, and I even love, Florida, Jacksonville, and I've spent time there, and it's a beautiful place. And hopefully we're going to work on getting the politics to the right place over the next few years, get it back in the blue column. And then probably go to Mexico City and spend some time with my parents sometime in August. And then also my best friend, basically my brother, who I've known since I was 8 or 7. So we've known each other almost 30 years. Damien, who I went to school with in France when I was a kid, he's coming to visit LA for a few days in August. So I'm really excited about that. He's flying all the way from Milan, where he lives now, to come spend 5 days with me in LA. So I'm really excited to see him. It's been a long time since he and I have seen each other, or at least spent quality time together. So anyway, there's a lot of good stuff coming up. And, throughout all of it, we're going to keep up the episodes here. We have a couple really good guests coming up, which I think you guys will be excited about. And I just hope that all of you have a great summer. I really appreciate all of you continuing to support me, continuing to support this podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to send them in at questions@dukesdownload.com. Feel free to leave any comments, suggestions on next guests, questions even for future Ask Duke Anything. We'll keep them notated. So, whenever we do this again, we'll have your questions in. But just thank you. Thank you is the main message. Just thank you for continuing to tune in, and see you next week. Thank you for joining me today on Duke's Download. This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by me, Duke Mason, and produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig. Original music composed by Nell Balaban. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It really helps others to discover the show. I'd love to stay connected with you, so join the conversation by following me at James Duke Mason on Instagram and X, or by emailing me at questions@dukesdownload.com.